What's up, YouTube? It's Nate, back and worse than ever, and I'm here to talk to you about brushes in RoughAnimator. So before we get started into making a brush, let's talk about how brushes work. The first thing we're going to talk about is brush shape. So the brush shape is what you are inputting into RoughAnimator to be replicated as a line, ultimately. Let's look at that. When I come into RoughAnimator and I draw, everything's scaled up, no rotation, no spacing, no flow, no opacity. Let's just start with everything off. This is what I get. This glob of pictures. These are my brush shapes. So, next thing that I'm going to want to look at, obviously, as I'm looking at this, I'm like, this isn't a line. So I'm going to turn on my randomized rotation. Okay, that's a little better. We're starting to get to something, but it's still so far apart and weird. So maybe I need to turn down my spacing. Now, as I turn my spacing down, let's try something like 14%. Okay, we're getting somewhere. But maybe it would look nicer if it wasn't just a big, you know? So I'm going to turn on pressure sensitivity. That's looking way more like a line. How do we get here? So the next thing I'm going to play with is my flow. Now, what is flow? In a previous video, if you guys watched it, flow was how opacity used to work. Flow is telling each one of these particles at the top, these big boys, that it needs to turn down in opacity. But if the spacing and rotation pass over each other, they're still going to get darker because they're two separate opacities working together. Opacity is when the whole line turns down together, which means that even if these two overlap, they're not going to get darker because the whole line is lowering. So flow is individual samples, opacity, whole line. Let's turn our flow down to 73%. Nice. This is something. Now, I know I've got my smoothing all the way up. So what if I turn that down to, let's try 3, which, if you guys will remember, I think is a great place to sketch at. Ooh, getting better. Now, it's still at this size. This brush in particular doesn't look good. So what if I turn the brush size down? Let's go for like 18. Interesting. Do you notice that? Now we've gone from this gross globby thing to a sort of almost like thick graphite. How do we get there? All of those settings together. The thing about making a good brush is you do have to kind of work through some puzzles. You have to work through each of those things we talked about. How will it interact when it rotates? How will it interact with pressure? How will it interact in flow, which is, again, the particles when they come over each other and get darker, or if you want all of it at once, opacity. Let's go ahead and look at the opacity, just so that we don't gloss over that. If I turn my opacity down to 18 and I draw lines, do you see how it gradually gets darker in the center? Now, if I turn my flow down and do the same thing, it's still going to do that, but not in the same way, because you can see all of my edges are still kind of gradual, where the other line is very clearly all turned down. So that's your difference in flow and opacity. Flow is working on individual samples, opacity is working on the entire line, which means, again, if we turn our flow to 60 and let's turn our flow down to like 16 and we pass over our line, do you see how it's building up onto itself each time we cross over? So you can work with a zero flow and you can build. Now let's try that with our flow turned up to 100 and our opacity at 20. Do you notice how it's never changing? It's because everything I'm inputting is coming in at that same value. So if you want a build-up line, you're going to turn your flow down. If you want that line to be built up separately, I still can draw over my low opacity with new opacity, but I have to lift my pen every time to get that same response. I'm going to say it at the beginning, and I'm going to say it at the end. Save your brush when you make it. How do you do that? Let's hop in and look at this brush that we're making today. A hairbrush. Wow, very nice. Press and hold the brush on the corner and you'll see a lot of settings come up. These are all the brushes I've made. Down at the bottom, Save New Brush Preset. Hit that. You're going to name your brush. I've made other hairbrushes before, so I'm going to name this one Hairbrush 3. I don't want to include the color, but that's an option that you have. And when I hit OK, I'm done. My brush is saved. Save your brush. If you don't, it's not super hard to remake it, but if you hit a setting that you're really happy with, it's annoying to have to remake it. So save your brush. So when I start, the first thing I think of is, what do I want my brush to do? Now, one of my favorite ones to make is a hairy brush. I like the little rat's nests that you can come up with. You can see that I'm a big rat's nest guy. Got big rat's nest hair. Some hair. So when I start that, I'm going to think through, what do I want it to look like? Do I want a hollow center? Do I want loose edges? Do I want flyaways? Yes. 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 Let's do this. So turn down this layer. And the first thing I'm going to do is change my resize crop expand. We're going to go with about 300. Okay. Now in my new canvas size, I want to take this brush and I'm just going to go to my fine line. I don't need a lot of fancy stuff since this is going to be so small. I don't really want it to work in a massive scale. I want it to work at a medium to small. Now, scale is a thing you need to consider whenever you're making a brush. A big brush that's going to be seen big is going to need a lot more thought going into the detail than a small brush that's only made to be seen small. So let's get back into it. I know that I want this hair to kind of fly all over the place. So I'm going to do something like this. Let's try something like this, and we'll see where we get to. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export this PNG. Hopefully you're familiar with the export process. If not, check out my other video. That one is an entirely different thing, and I don't want to accidentally spoil any NDA or cool secret fun stuff I'm working on by showing you my files. So I'm going to skip ahead to where my PNG is ready. So I've loaded my brush shape in, but I'm going to show you the steps to get that back in. First thing you do is tap your brush shape, scroll down to add brush shape, click browse, and select the shape you want in. There's my hair. Since I've already got it in here, we're good. All right, so to set everything back up, I'm going to go ahead and set everything back to how it was. There we go. There's our weird hair shape. It doesn't look like anything. This isn't going to cut it for us. So let's go ahead and put on that randomized rotation. A little better. And now I'm going to speed things up. I'm going to turn my spacing down to about 35. This is better. This is a little more of what I'm looking for. So I know that I'm not going to be using it this size. I'm going to go size it down to like 65, just so I'm at a good spot. I'm going to turn my smoothing down. This isn't the kind of brush you want to use smooth. Now I'm already liking what's going on here. So I'm going to turn pressure sensitivity on. I'm really liking this. And now if I turn my flow down, okay. I love this hairbrush. Hairbrushes are one of the funnest brushes to make in RoughAnimator, in my opinion. And it's because they really have like a tangible feel and they're so easy to do. You can see those little frizzies on the end. Oh man, that's nice. That's nice. And then if I want some lighting in there, I can turn up a little bit and I can come and I can... Ooh. And that's a hairbrush, guys. All brushes fall into those same principles. As you're sitting down to think about the brush you want, first think about what you're aiming towards. Is it a pencil? Is it an ink glob? Is it hair? What is it? Next, think through what would the individual speck look like? And you don't have to have it perfect. You can try, fail, and then try again. Let's look at what it would look like to do a graphite brush slightly wrong and then correct it to get something we want. I have an idea for an illustration that I want to have a final inked feel of a graphite pencil. So I'm going to make a graphite pencil. These are easy. I'll talk about a few other things along the way. But what I'm primarily looking for is something porous, but I want it to be clean. The main reason I'm not just going to use one of my existing pencils, you can see here as I open pencil, this is one of mine, make it big enough that you can actually see what's going on there. This is nice, but this is a thick line. You can see there's rough edges. Generally, it's solid, and I don't really want that in this brush. Now, again, like I said, I want this to be porous. So as I'm thinking about that, I'm going to be thinking about each of the individual samples, how they'll interact with each other, and how that's going to look in my final line. So I'm going to start by kind of building the edge-ish of where this sample is going to go. And I think I want it to be pretty round. So this isn't a perfect circle, but let's go with something like that. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to add some details around like this. I think that looks pretty good for a place for us to start. Now, make sure when you're exporting these that you do use a transparent background because you don't want the white square to show up in all of your pixels. Okay, so already you can see with my brush in there, it's still just giving me that solid center, kind of rough edge. That's not quite what I'm wanting. So I'm going to start by turning the flow down. Let's go to like 40%, and I'm going to turn my spacing up to like 17. Now you can see I'm starting to get it there. I'm starting to get some of that feeling I'm looking for. So I'm going to turn my spacing up a little more. 36 is probably too much. What about 29? Okay, I like that. That's pretty cool. That's giving me a little bit of a graphite feel. Now the thing is, I'm not using this for my build-up line. I'm going to explain that to you guys. When I'm drawing, I'll start out with my sketches, right? Here's my sketch. Here we go. And my character's going to be looking down, and they're going to kind of, I'm going to have this, right? I'm assessing. Ooh. So once I've got my sketch laid out, I don't want my lines to look built up. Not for this one. I don't want them to be like a built up line. I want them to be a final line, which is why I'm going to call it inking. It's not technically, but it is. So let's check out what that looks like. For me, I think one of the most important things to remember here is work with your tools against your ego, not the other way around. Sometimes it's easy to say, I don't use smoothing because I don't need to. That's great. Everyone works their own way. But if it's ego that's stopping you from using a tool that can help you, it's good to remember that tools are there for us to use. And if you learn how to use them well, it's not a problem. So, jumping back in, the next thing I would do is add my empty layer. I'm going to turn that down, and I'm going to turn off my pressure sensitivity and my random rotation, just to see if this helps me get more of that look I'm going for. So as I come in, oh, do you see I'm already getting some weird results with that rotation. Nothing rotating means that I'm just getting this gross spinal column looking thing. So I'm going to turn that back on. But with no pressure sensitivity, I'm kind of liking what's happening there. Let's try going at about 7 for our width. Ooh, okay. And if I turn my smoothing all the way up, now I'm really getting some interesting results here. This isn't quite what I had in mind, but it's showing me where some of the things that I can change are. So generally, as I zoom out, this is fun. This is a really fun idea, but it feels like it's a low opacity brush. And now I can turn my flow up. That's just going to get me back to this hairy line. I can space out more, and that's going to get me some like weird dots here. But I think generally what I'm going to want to do is play a little bit more with my brush shape. So what I'm looking for is some more spots in the center where there are holes. Now with the things that I know about my brush currently, I know that I want a random rotation, and I know that right now my center is too solid. So I can't create the same hole in every one. I don't want just a direct empty center, because then my random rotation doesn't matter. That center hole is just always going to be in the middle, and I'm just going to have little dots throughout my whole line. So what I want to do is figure out a way that when I start randomly rotating, I'm going to get different and unique holes. To me, what that says is I need some globs. So let's try that. So a little glob here. I'm going to go with a big glob here. Go ahead and fill those in. I want to try doing like maybe a line. We'll see if that gives us something interesting. I'm going to do something like this and this. Little like this. Now, these shapes, I know you could do something that has like a little more intention to it, and you definitely should. But what I'm experimenting with is that since my brush is going to be so small, I know what I want in those little gaps, and I know that I basically need to cheat to get there. So I'm just creating something that's going to hopefully give me what I'm looking for. This is a super weird shape. Let's go with it. Now that I've got my brush loaded, I'm going to reset to one of my existing settings. I'm going to go to my pencil, which has pressure sensitivity, random rotation. I'm going to turn my flow all the way up for now. We'll play with that as we go. So as I start my line, you can see I'm closer to where I want to be. Look at those little gaps there. I've got some interesting stuff going on that's really playing to what I'm hoping to end up with in my final result. So as I keep tweaking this and my hair gets more insane, you can tell that I'm starting to get kind of where I want to go. So what are we missing in this line? I'm going to say some spacing. Let's go up to 15. Ooh, okay. That's giving me a little bit of a graphite feel. Maybe if I turn off my pressure sensitivity. Okay, I'm liking that. Turn my spacing up a little more. Ooh, okay. This is looking nice. Let's turn our flow down to about 50%. Now that's maybe lower than I wanted to go. I'm going to try 75. And I'll look at it at 100 again. Do I feel like it made a difference? I don't know that it did enough that I care, so I'm going to keep it at 100 for this brush. Now again, I know my pressure sensitivity off is how I want that final ink to go, but I need to make sure that this is going to do what I want it to. I'm going to be using it with full smoothing. So let's turn our smoothing up. Okay. Okay, that's nice. I like that. Look at it, it's zoomed out. You can kind of get this sense of a texture going on in it. Yep, I like that. I hope it was helpful, and I hope you remember to save your brush. How do you do that? One more time, let's look at it. Press and hold that brush in the left corner. Scroll down, save new brush preset. Name it what you want to name it. I'm going to name this one Save Your Brush. I'm going to include the color. Save your brush. What if I save too many brushes? Well, delete a brush. Watch this. Press and hold. I shouldn't have saved that Save Your Brush brush. So I'm going to delete it. Delete your brush. Let's do it. It's gone. That's it. To open a new brush that you've already saved, press and hold, and there's all your brush settings. Thanks for... Well, guys, that was another super long one. Thanks if you sat through the whole thing. If you didn't, that's okay too. So I'd love to hear from you guys. What would you like next? Do you want shorter videos? Are you looking for specific tutorials in different things? How can I be helpful? It's easy for me to want to just make things to help you, but I don't always know what that is. So feel free to comment below and let me know what you're looking for, what I can do to help you, and hopefully we'll get more of that. Thanks for watching. Come back soon.